ready. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo Monday meeting. I'd like to again start with a few housekeeping rules since some of you may not have been here last week. The restrooms are just down the hall past where you grab your badges. The guest floor microphone, we moved it, is now right behind Chuck Stocking over here in the middle of the room instead of in the back. The committee meeting rooms are down the hall as you walk past them as you came in, and I think we might have a couple in here today because we have so many committees meeting. And each week you should bring in your parking stub with you so that you can get a sticker put on it and not be charged additional parking. If all of you would take the time to quiet down your phones, check them and make sure. If you'd like to let everyone know you're here on Facebook, Instagram, at this great facility and at this meeting, that'd be great. And if Bob says something outstanding, you might want to record it or puts up a slide and share it with your friends and family on social media. And at this time, I'd like to ask Bob Amthor to come on over and give us the reflection in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. A scout is reverent. This is the 12th point of the Scout Law. It ties directly to the part of the oath that states, "To do my duty to God and my country." Scouting recognizes that there is a higher moral authority to which each of us looks for guidance in our daily lives. Today we will hear about Toledo Tomorrow and its focus on education. Education is foundational to success in life, as well as developing respect for others and for property, such as the Rotary Cabin at Camp Miaconda. It is one of many ways in which Rotary is very focused on improving community and thereby country. This is really shown when we reflect on the four-way test, as in, is it the truth and is it beneficial to all concerned? May we be grateful each day for the opportunity to be respectful and reverent to others, to contribute to the betterment of our community and country, and continue the good works of Rotary. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. One thing I'd like to make an announcement before you all get too settled is there are cookies back by the iced tea and the water. So we had several comments in the program evaluations last week of where the dessert was. So you might want to grab one now before you miss out. I'd like to acknowledge Ladder 419 as our monthly meeting sponsor and fellow Rotarian Kevin Mullen. Does anyone have any guests with them today? I know, Bob, you have a slew of them out there. We can you can do it, yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
On behalf of our speaker, we have a guest that works with Bob. This is Melvin, who's double duty today, works for Bob's organization that we'll hear about today, and is really active in helping getting started our Rotaract group. Melvin, so welcome again.
President Cindy and Rotarians, I brought a guest with me today. This is Andrew Curran. He's our Assistant Scout Executive for Erie Shores Council.
All right. I know we have at least one visiting Rotarian, so if Brad could come to the floor mic and introduce her. I don't see him. He did escape. So, Pat, if you would like to stand up and announce what club you're from.
Yes, thanks. I'm Pat Corey with the Oregon Northwood Club.
All right. At this time, I'd like to ask Kurt Church to come up to the podium and introduce new member Karen Strammel. I'd like you both to come up.
Okay, the stage is a lot more impressive and imposing than it was at the library. So, it's my pleasure to introduce to you my friend Karen Stramel. She spells her name C-A-R-I-N, so you cannot get her confused with any of the Central Park Karens that you may have seen on social media or come across. This is not her. Karen and I first met when our now 11-year-old boys went to daycare together. These boys rolled around like most boys do their age and became fast friends. We've been friends since that time and would see each other at many events, mostly having to do with school. Karen comes to Toledo after spending her youth in Chicago and gained those good Midwestern values of hard work and good character. Even though she is a South Sider, she roots for the Cubs. Karen's career began in sales for companies you may have heard of, like Sears and Steinmart, as a corporate buyer, which took her to several states, including Florida. Welcome back to the cold and dreary winters we have here. I know that's been a while back, but nonetheless. Locally, Karen is a sales and marketing expert, having had jobs with iHeartMedia, Xerox, and now Advanced Brand Marketing. Her expertise has been beneficial to our own Rotary office by assisting Jackie with her marketing needs. Karen has long been a proponent of volunteering and has done so with the American Heart Association, Habitat for Humanity, March of Dimes, and also where our kids go to school at Highland Elementary. Karen attempts to get her employers involved with her philanthropic ways to provide them with more visibility within the community. Karen's free time consists of rooting for her beloved Chicago sports team and Notre Dame. Nice that their head coach, Marcus Freeman, is an All-American from The Ohio State University. She is also into sports. Her weekends are filled with following her son around playing travel basketball, soccer, and baseball. I know that's fun and somewhat expensive. You can also find her looking for craft beer events in the local area. Karen's pet peeve is people who are not kind. Very good one. Please give a round of applause for Karen Stramel finding her next passion with the Rotary Club of Toledo.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Kurt. And Karen has already jumped in and been active, not only what Kurt mentioned, helping Jackie with some of the different marketing products we've been looking for, but also with the International Services Committee and the Peace Conference we just had. So welcome, Karen. Next, I'd like to call member Allison Hammonds up to the podium to recognize her in celebrating her 6 months as a Toledo Rotarian. So you get to exchange badges. I'll give you this one.
You don't want to put it on for me?
Oh, gosh. That'd be something. Congratulations, Allison, and thank you for all you're doing so far with the Rotary Club. And as you see this big check I have over here, today we're going to submit the check to Ed Caldwell and his guest for the grant that was submitted to the Boy Scouts of America. So if you can join me up here, Ed.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Rotarians, for the gift to help us refurbish the Toledo Rotary cabin at Miaconda. It's the second oldest building at camp. Here's a picture of the building in 1920 when it was erected and dedicated at Camp Miaconda from the Toledo Rotary Club. Next slide is the cornerstone, where you can see where it says Toledo Rotary Club 1920. The cabin erected by the Toledo Rotary Club in 1920 and presented to Toledo Boy Scout Council is on the other side of that corner of that building. Next slide. So After a building has been around as long as this building has been, might imagine we've done some facelifts to it over the years, but it was time again for a new roof, and the chimney was in desperate need of tuck pointing. So there's the tear off. Actually, if you could go back one slide. Can you see on the right-hand picture, you can see how the roof has kind of a bow to it? So that's not a typical roof line for a building. But when they built the building, the timber that is in the center of the roof line hadn't cured yet. And so when it dried, it took upon that shape. And so it was a little more of a challenge to put a roof on it, but it has a new roof on it. So you can go back to the next slide. So you can see the tear off of new shingles, thanks to Owens Corning, who provided those to us. Next slide. And there's the chimney that was leaking and had some problems and was getting some moisture inside the building. And you can see what it looks like now. It still has a little bit, is that the final slide? I think it is. It has some wood around the back side that overhangs the ravine on Hartman Ditch that runs through the property. But it's really important for us to keep this historic building around, and I really thank the Rotary Club of Toledo for helping us do that. I might be the scout executive of the council, but I didn't do any work on the building. Bob Anthorpe and did Dan help? Dan Anderson and a few other good volunteers did the work. So thanks to them as well. Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ed. And thank you, Bob and Dan Anderson. I'd like to remind everyone that we still have about 20 tickets left for the Walleye game on February 3rd. So if you wanted to get one to take your family, please grab one. And just as a side note, I've been told that there'll be photo ops with the Hulk there, if you have any little ones that love the Hulk. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Greg Fess, who is going to introduce our speaker today, Bob Savage.
Thank you, Madam President. When I was asked to introduce my friend Bob Savage, I thought, well, this will be dead easy. I'll just invoke the old saw, a man who needs no introduction, and then sit down. But on the off chance that we have someone in our company who isn't familiar with our fellow Rotarian, Bob Savage, Bob's a lifelong Toledoan, grew up in Old Orchard, went to St. John's, and then on to the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Economics. He came home and founded Savage Consulting, a venture capital firm focusing on private-public collaborative opportunities. I might add that Savage Consulting is now 25 years and it's going strong. So you have something to be proud of there, young man. Bob has served the Toledo Community Foundation Investment Committee, the Toledo and Lucas County Plan Commissions, and our own Rotary Board of Directors. Bob's going to tell us today about his latest venture. No, not a business opportunity, but a nonprofit Northwest Ohio educational venture for our young people. Its name is Toledo Tomorrow, which Bob started in 2018. Bob describes Toledo Tomorrow as a college and career access initiative. I'll let him tell you what that is.
Thanks, Greg. Just one minor correction, just because I know I saw Father O and Joe Sweeney cringe. I jokingly tell my cousins, lots of whom went to St. John's, that I was part of the smart enough part of the family that went to St. Francis. But anyway, they're both good schools. Anyway, I'm here today to talk about, not really talk about Toledo Tomorrow, but to talk about education in our community. Speaking of other good schools. And what Toledo Tomorrow is about is showing youth originally, and we've actually branched out a little bit into adults, opportunities that exist right here in our community and right here in our region that probably, unfortunately, too many households don't really see or don't see enough of. And not only then showing them, but then trying to help give them access. And I see a number of our partners here in the room, and we have partnered from day one. And it's going to take all of us and more to do what we want to. But showing opportunities and giving access to opportunities, that is what Toledo Tomorrow is about. And I will talk more about the Northwest Ohio Regional Education Partnership as go on here. Before I go on too long, in addition, I'm not going to call out partners because I see too many of them here to introduce. But I am going to call out my team, who actually does the work, or lots of the work. And actually, Dr. Duran, I don't know if you know you're sitting next to some of our team. In fact, Maya Martin, sitting right next to you, is the newest member of our team here today, and Michelle Bissell sitting next to her. Melvin Jackson down here at the front table, you already met today. And then in the back table there, Paula Mariano and Liam Squire round out a lot of our team here. So glad to have all those folks here. Proud to be part of their team. Where do I point this? Okay. Thank you if that wasn't me. So what this slide shows, and can I pick this up? Make sure everybody over here can see too. What this slide shows is per capita income of all these cities on this axis and on the horizontal axis there, the percentage of adults in those communities with a bachelor's degree, or as the education world calls that, attainment. And probably no surprise, there's a very high correlation between these two. And up in the upper right-hand side, you see San Jose, Boston, Washington, D.C., and Toledo is not named, but as you might guess by Detroit and Grand Rapids being down here, you would also see Cleveland, Buffalo, and Toledo would be in that part of the graph. And that's not really where we want to be. But the one important takeaway also from the last slide is this is not just about education. This is about our region. This is about prosperity. And this is about how we live here. It has a huge impact, and education directly affects all of that. So, how do we make improvements? If we want to make improvements, we need to be results oriented. That's the way I've always been in my career. I know that the TPS team and others focused on the same things, but you need to have goals and you need to be keeping track of numbers. The second box here, you see data driven. I'm in part a finance guy, paid attention to numbers my whole life and have not stopped doing that now. One key member on the other part of the top of our team is former Ernst & Young. All about numbers. That is what we are focused on. Advancing equity. Equity is for economically disadvantaged households is one of the things we are hugely focused on. Unfortunately, there's a huge correlation with race in that, but it is not just one thing or another, and there are all sorts of disadvantaged folks and minorities of different folks. We are here to help everybody. And on the last box, collaborative action, and I see Partners Education, foundations in here, and others. It will take everybody in our community to drive the results that we really want. These are just a few of the local statistics, and I'm not going to spend too long on this page, but unfortunately the top one is, of the 88 counties in Ohio, the one with the highest poverty rate is right here. And education has something to do with that. Average household income in the city of Toledo, less than $37,000. And the average household in Toledo probably has 2-point-something kids in it as well. As far as degrees go, average number in Toledo, 19% of adults or thereabouts have a degree. If you happen to be a white household, the number is better, 22%. Not great, just better. But unfortunately, if you happen to be in a black household, the number is less than 11%. Okay, it's not right, it's not good, and that is just one of the things we are here to fix. And unfortunately, when you look at the education statistics, and we are not going to disaggregate all of them as the statisticians say, but if you disaggregate them by race, unfortunately, you see the wrong numbers and you see disparities. I'm sorry, can we go back a second? So Pell Grant eligibility, and we started on college and career focus, helping kids get to college and see the opportunities and find financial aid, money, scholarships, and grants to go to college. So the federal Pell Grant is the largest bucket of need-based student aid. It is now actually just over $7,000 a year, so it's gone up. And the state of Ohio has another $2,200 a year if you want to go to a two-year school, up to $2,200. 85% of TPS households are eligible for the federal Pell Grant. Probably not surprising that the number is high. What's probably more surprising is we have 4 school districts in the Toledo area that are not TPS households that have 40% or higher of their households are Pell Grant eligible. Now, the good thing about Pell Grant eligibility is if you are Pell Grant eligible or anywhere near fully Pell eligible, which is probably household income of $40,000, Owens Community College is free or next to free, or a different community college if you want to go somewhere else. So the opportunities for education are there, but no one knows that. I'm going to say no one knows that, but not enough people know that. And there are great paths, and not everyone's going to go to college either, and that's fine. We're helping folks with career tech opportunities as well, introducing them to great employers, taking them on tours once in a while. If you look at TPS, and certainly TPS is a district that we do far and away the most work with, there are other challenges there, and you see one up here. If you looked at the number of percentage of students with IEPs, so disabled students, 20%, maybe low 20%, I think is the right number. Single parent households and all other kind of factors that put them behind the 8 ball. That being said, if you look at TPS and you look at the other districts that we work with too, you'll see some very good successes and things that may surprise you in a good way. There's a young lady who graduated from TPS last year that is on a full ride at Case Western Reserve this fall. And they're not the only one. Valedictorian at Woodward High School 2 years ago is down at Ohio State. Got some really nice scholarships to Ohio State. Didn't quite cover everything. She decided to go ROTC, picks up the rest of it. She will graduate from Ohio State and be debt-free. And we see more of those happening, but the more the students and the households see the opportunities, the more of that can happen. This is actually one of the reasons we probably started Toledo Tomorrow, and a pretty interesting slide if you can read it. And I've seen others that start all the way back in kindergarten and ask the parents, would you like your child to go to high school, or do you think or college rather, or do you think that they're going to go to college? And the percentages are high. But unfortunately, as you move down, and so the delineation here is between economically stable houses and economically unstable houses. And this is not the top end of the spectrum and the bottom end of the spectrum. This is a split right down the middle. Graduate from college, and I think it's 84% and 70%. 70% is not bad. Actually, one thing that has changed dramatically since Dr. Durant became superintendent is graduation rate from TPS is one of the best of the urban districts in Ohio, and is continuing to go up, like all of the other statistics. Yep. And Gail and the rest of his colleagues, some of that clapping was from you too, but Dr. Duran at the top of the team has done a hell of a job. But then when you get to enroll in college, then the disparity starts to be a lot bigger. 84%, 41%. Finish college by age 24, not 21, not 22. This disparity is ungodly. 80% and 8%. Now, I personally think this is morally wrong. But for those who don't think that, there's all kinds of economic reasons to want to change that. Cuyahoga County did a study about a decade ago, and the results of the study said that for every student that doesn't finish high school will cost various levels of government $800,000 over the rest of that person's life. We are spending huge money by not investing a little more in education. A couple other statistics. So we're going to talk about third grade reading a couple times in here, and we'll talk about spelling later, which we missed something in the first line. But students who fail third grade reading are 4 times less likely to graduate from high school. They're also almost the same less likely to pass the eighth grade math test, which is one of the next key tests along the education spectrum. If we could boost Ohioans with degrees by 1%, that would increase our state GDP by $3.4 billion. $3.4 billion, and for states that have been moving on this a little longer, and there is a collective group in Ohio, we're actually part of at least 4 statewide networks and peer groups working on things related to what we do. You see states that are up almost 1% a year. 1% a year would be another Marathon Oil and another Rudolph Libby in our state for every 1% we go up. I mean, a huge increase in our economy and meaningful boost in jobs. By age 27, if a young person can get a bachelor's degree, they will earn 68% more. Big increase. Again, there's more than just the college route, but get on a route and go there. And unfortunately, when you go to the more extreme end of things, and this is why you see numbers like $800,000 of costs over the career, high school dropouts are 60 times more likely to go to prison. That is not a typo. 60 is correct. So one of the good things we're doing is we now have a universal pre-K program and pilot that John Jones and Shauna Woody and the Hope Toledo team are running. There are 300 students in that program this fall. And it's a decent increase from last year. On the other hand, there's a long way to go. This number, I think, might be a little bit dated. I think a more recent number is 18 to 19%. But if you think of all those of us who are business people, only 20% pass the test to move on. Just think if you had to run your company where 80% of the people didn't pass the interviews or didn't pass the test. None of us would do that, and it wouldn't be good for the company. That's the hand of cards that TPS gets on day one. So the strive and the numbers they've made on the other side have been great. Toledoans with bachelor's degree, we already talked about that. In the last circle, talks about Lucas County attainment rates against bachelor's degrees, about 39%. We are also the lowest of the big counties in Ohio. Correlates very closely. It is the same as the poverty rates. Ohio, and I've lived in Ohio my whole life. Ohio's got great quality of life, a lot of good other things. We are 35th in the United States. Back in 2019, almost half of our citizens have a degree. That number has moved up slightly, and you'll be glad to know now we're in 34th. We just moved up a spot. We are 0.1% ahead of Kentucky. In all fairness to all the good people in Kentucky, which I'm sure there are lots more than I know, that's probably not a state we would compare ourselves to very often. And quite frankly, it's not one we should compare ourselves to, I don't think. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about STRIVE metrics, and I'll explain on the next slide what STRIVE metrics are. But these are some of the key indicators for education. Kindergarten readiness, and it's got to start way before kindergarten. In the 0 to 5 space, which is one of the most important part of 0 to 5 is 0 to 3. Third grade reading, 8th grade math, you all can read this, high school graduation, post-secondary enrollment, completion, so we don't want them to just enroll, we want them to get out the other side, and then employment. And you can apply completion, and post-secondary means both college and career tech. So, I'd ask the question, several of you may know the answer to this question. If you want to look at college graduation or high school graduation, the two most important statistics or leading indicators for education statisticians will tell you the two most important are up here. They are kindergarten readiness and third grade reading proficiency for both high school and college graduation. You have to build it's just like building a house in the foundation. You have to have the foundation right to build the rest of the house. Our colleagues over in Akron will tell you that and they've been doing this longer than we have in looking at these numbers, for those who pass the third grade reading proficiency test, you then, when you get to the 8th grade math proficiency test, have a 77% chance of passing that 8th grade math test. But unfortunately, if you do not pass the third grade reading proficiency test, that number drops to 21%, near a factor of 4 if you weren't ready to read by third grade. And the big part of it is, if you're behind at that point, it just gets hard to catch up. Now, on the other hand, there are communities out there have been doing things and putting their arms around the children and around the households and making improvement in numbers. One of the big things is the universal pre-K program. We are now the last of the 6 big Ohio cities to start one of those programs. When we started Toledo Tomorrow 5.5 years ago, we were the last of the big 6 cities to have a college and career readiness program. Strive Together, it was actually founded in Cincinnati and is the national organization that is sort of recognized as the thought leader or is followed by the Cradle to Career organizations. That's what the C2C stands for. And from the prior slide, looked at the education spectrum and looked at the core progression of students along that spectrum and followed them in detail. And of course have conferences, seminars, and so on, and are also followed by a number of big national foundations that will help local communities that are moving along. And they provide coaching for you, they help you build infrastructure, and they have helped a number of cities in Ohio leverage outside funding to enhance what they're doing in their communities. We have had a Strive Together chapter, as they're so called. So education organizations are allowed to sign up and belong to the chapter. We had one here. It's not a chapter anymore, but I think we're going to have a new one here by the end of this year. And we and our partners are working on that. So these are the Strive statistics, and as you hear us talk in the community, you'll probably hear about this a little more, but we'll also show them relatively. So, if you look at them in aggregate, this doesn't necessarily look very good. On the other hand, if you had every other Ohio city up here, it would look something like this. There is nobody that is wildly different from this. And as you look in every state, you see the counties that have the big metro areas, it's a little lower than the state average, and unfortunately in the city that's a little lower yet. So working on the numbers in the blue part of the graph will help improve all the other parts of the graph. So here we are going to compare the rest of the cities in Ohio, because quite frankly, the environment in Ohio and the regional economy in Ohio does impact all the rest of us, as it does in Southeast Michigan. And so we picked out these as sort of the latter end of the spectrum on enrolling in a post-secondary program and then completing the programs. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good here, but it doesn't look good anywhere else too. And if you want to pull out something and pat Toledo on the back a little bit, Cleveland started with the higher number up here, but it's lower down there. So we're doing better than Cleveland. And we're doing better than several of them in a number of different areas, but I think probably the obvious message is these numbers aren't very high, and we'd like them to be higher. And we are partnered with all of the colleges around here. We have never been doing work from day one, and these are some of our partners, or these are a number of our bigger partners in working all along the spectrum. And you'll see everybody from the state of Ohio down to local neighborhood organizations. And we want to work with neighborhood organizations. Unfortunately, we have way too many neighborhoods in Toledo that I don't want to say they're forgotten, but they don't get as much help as some of the rest of the parts of the community do. And you've got a ton of kids there that need help. But kids who are actually doing some good things. We've met with, and actually a lot of the rest of my team sits down every week with tens of students and meets with them one-on-one. There's a young lady right now who is second in her class in one of the public schools at Toledo and is involved in all kinds of things at school. She's come out of the foster system. She doesn't have a family. She never had a family. And she's kept it together to do all sorts of things in school and be number 2 in her class. She is probably going to Ohio State University, where she has already been accepted. Workforce development. I'm not going to spend too much time on this other than just note the first circle here. 75% of the fastest growing jobs in Ohio require some sort of certificate or degree past high school. And if you talk to a number of companies now, and we all can see this already, how many jobs exist today that didn't exist 10 and 20 years ago? That's going to happen again. And it probably happens at an even faster rate. We need more folks like Bitwise training more people. Actually, when I was going to college, I spent a summer working on the floor at the GM powertrain transmission plant up on Alexis Road. We last year took a busload of kids from Wade High School out to First Solar and toured out there. And as you might imagine, I don't know how many of you have had the chance to go in there, it's a pretty cool looking plant. Very modern, tons of robots. The GM plant now, I went to an open house this summer, doesn't look all that much different from First Solar. You'd be amazed how similar it looks. The biggest fleet of robots in Toledo, out at the Stellantis Jeep plant. 1,000 robots just on the Wrangler side of the assembly. That doesn't even include the Gladiator side, 1,000. But what's being done elsewhere and what can we do here? So I've said from day one, and this is definitely true, I don't think we do a single unique thing at Toledo tomorrow. We don't do anything that's not done in a different community. We've just gone out and looked and paid attention to what the other communities are doing and borrowed best practices. So Dr. Durant's team asked us to run their college fair this past fall. We did. We had close to 60 colleges at the fair, and we had 700 students go through the fair. TPS has actually always had a good college fair. I've been to it several times before, but we did increase the number of students fairly significantly going to it. And the main reason we did it was we looked at what Cleveland was doing because we knew they had high attendance, and we stole one of their ideas, and all of a sudden we got a big increase over here. And there's lots more of those things we can still do here. And our other sort of urban peers are doing great things. And you'll see just a little bit about some of their organizations. College Now in Cleveland was the one that started this has been going for over 50 years over there. Things we've only been doing maybe for 5 years here. And admittedly, there are 150 employees that cover 80 school districts in the much greater Cleveland are doing way more things than our team of 8 people. And if you add a couple part-times together, we're closer. We're not yet to 7, although in a couple weeks, actually, we'll be at 7 with the young lady that we've just hired. The Higher Ed Compact of Greater Cleveland, their director, Maggie McGrath, is on our advisory board. Learn to Earn Dayton, which is considered the Cadillac of the Cradle to Career organizations in Toledo. Tom Lasley, their founder and longtime CEO, is also on our advisory board. And we want to stay in touch with the best practices. And things that can be done in these other cities, they all can be done here too. And that's, having the networks together and learning from those. But so Dayton and Akron are the two cities that look the most like Toledo. Those are both full cradle to career organizations, so all along the spectrum, and they're doing nice work over there, and they've made a lot of progress. You will see some of the largest foundations in the country are investing money and supporting projects in other Ohio cities, and we're not there yet, but we're making some progress. I noticed so one of the things, so I was a management consultant for a lot of my career. So looking at best practices was not something new to me. Just doing an education was something new to me. So we quickly just went around and looked at what they were doing. And then I asked them, where'd you get your money? Because I realized they had a lot more money than we did. So lots of them figure out how to get a lot more money from Columbus to come to their community. And we've done okay on that. We've been partnering with the state for a few years. We actually just recently, there was an award announced from the U.S. Department of Education. But they've got bigger sources, and they've been at it longer, but we've made some reasonable progress, and we're catching up. One thing I guess to note just on the backbone, and I think I've talked to probably all our partners or our partners we work with a lot. In moving toward a cradle-to-career organization, that doesn't mean that we're going to go start a pre-K program, we're going to start a tutoring program. What the state would like us to do, and they're actually maybe the first ones that asked us to do it, as a backbone organization, which just means we have more conversations in the community and we support the organization. So the universal pre-K effort, and that is one of the most important efforts now going on in this community. Everybody should get behind it. Hope Toledo, John and Sean and their team seem to be doing a good job. We need to get them the money to run the rest of the program. Every other of the big cities in Ohio have passed a small levy to do that, and it really would be a small levy. On the other hand, if we were going around collecting checks, it's about an $8 million number a year for Toledo. But if you put that in levy terms, very small millage. But then we should just get out of their way and let them do what they do. We don't need redundancy around here. Let's rally support behind it and do that. So a couple things, I guess, on what we've been doing, since it was part of the reason I was invited to speak here. So we've had interactions with over 1,100 students, and you can see maybe my math isn't very good, even just adding the 2 boxes below. One of the things we do to show students the opportunities and take them on tours of campus. We have had a number of counselors in public schools, not just Toledo Public Schools, say most of our kids have been to the University of Toledo, but also most of our kids have never been to another college campus, including Owens Community College, just because it's far enough outside the city and it's not that easy to get to. And just by starting those in larger numbers after the pandemic, we've seen pretty big increases. Last year, 39% in the number of students that were attending UT and Bowling Green. Will absolutely tell you, as were our colleagues, the counselors in the public schools, college tours was one of the reasons that happened. We talked about the career fair. Another reason it happened was we know students will follow the money. Students are going to go where they get financial aid to go. Now, if you've learned about the process ahead of time and you pay attention to the deadlines and you get some help filling out admission applications, scholarship applications, FAFSA forms, and all that kind of good stuff. And I've never been to a room yet where somebody didn't complain about filling out the FAFSA form. It's not super easy. On the other hand, for $1 an hour basis, it can be really helpful. We helped students pick up at least $350,000 last year who were the fall 22s class in college. And we've seen, and it wasn't just 1 year, we've seen some continued good increases. Even this year already, we've seen an additional 14% increase in the number of students who have been admitted to University of Toledo and Bowling Green. And we know a huge percentage of our kids who are going to 4-year schools will end up at one of those. I haven't talked a lot about the workforce work we've been doing, but we have been, and actually that's what Melvin does all the time. He meets with companies around here. He gets a little bit of help from me and others on the team, and trying to build bridges and pathways to our good jobs and our good employers around here. And so when we entered the the workforce world here, which the county and the state had asked us to do, we pretty quickly got put on a couple local committees, and NOMA, as it goes by, the Northwest Ohio Manufacturing Alliance was one of them. The Macro Coalition, anybody in the workforce world, there are macro coalitions in every one of the counties in Ohio, or at least Northwest Ohio, which are sort of workforce and economic development entities that get together. And we've had meetings with all of these companies, and probably at least 5 times as many of them, and help get them more engaged. So the NOMA Alliance, GM and Bitwise weren't in the NOMA Alliance until we met with them. Not that we're the only ones that could do that. And TPS also has a really good career expo, one of the very biggest, some years I'm sure the biggest career expo in town. They had over 90 companies this year, and we recruited a number of companies to them, including those you see on the right hand of the page. So I've probably said everything that's on this slide already, maybe just not as eloquently at this sentence, which I won't read. But the Regional Education Partnership is about showing opportunities and connecting people to opportunities regardless of where you were born, regardless of your zip code, regardless of your race, your life circumstance. We've been in meetings, and I remember I was in with Michelle, and it might have been Paula last year, helping kids fill out forms toward the end of the year. And we were at one of the high schools, and I think it was Michelle was in working with the student. The counselor was out in the hallway talking to me and said, both of those kids' parents have OD'd. No parents at home. We're at a different high school the next week. Same sort of situation. Paula, I think, was in the room. 3 years ago, dad died. 3 months ago, mom died. And there unfortunately are way more kids out there like that, and Romulus knew that way before. But there are kids out there that need help and need some hand-holding and need some assistance along the way. Can I get next slide? If I'm pressing the right button. So we started as College and Career Access. We've been doing some workforce work now for about a year, and we were moving toward the cradle to career direction. When we were sending our original proposal to the state, this was the name we put on it. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 2 years you see a name more like C2C Toledo or something like that, that we probably stole from Cincinnati. You see a C2C Cincinnati down there. But there's lots of good work that can be done, and lots more that can be done. We've got a back burner of other ideas that we either so far don't have enough people to help implement or just haven't had enough time. Can I get the next slide? Thank you. And these are partnerships that are around the state. And if you draw maps of the other groups that we're involved with, the Ohio College and Career Access groups, the Ohio Cradle to Career networks, the maps look somewhat similar. There's a little more in Central Ohio, but the universal theme in Northwest Ohio is, I think this is right, in all 4 of the groups we belong to, there is nothing else in Northwest Ohio except our initiative up here. And quite frankly, the state would like us to move down to Findlay and Lima and Fremont and Defiance and elsewhere, and we told them, unless you're going to give us a lot more support than you're giving us, we're going to stay in Toledo, in greater Toledo right now, and make sure things are better in our backyard before we go too far. Although, if other communities want to step in, we'll do more. But this was really our mission from day one. We're working one-on-one with kids. We're showing them opportunities. We're working with adults. We help those individuals. We help their families, the families they're part of now, the families they may start 5 to 10 years later, their communities, however they define those communities. And if we do this right, we're helping the regional economy. And it's a win-win for everybody. So that's a little bit about the educational landscape here and an introduction to Toledo Tomorrow. Thank you.
If you have any questions for Bob, can you please go up to the floor mic in the middle of the room?
Hi, Bob.
Brent.
Thank you so much, number
Happy New
one.
Year.
Thank you, thank you. thank you for doing this. I mean, this is an inspiring story. It's a hopeful story. It's, you know, I've heard at Toledo Tomorrow. I didn't know really anything much about what you were doing. It's so needed. So it's all very encouraging. The observation I would have as a question, I guess, is, okay, Ohio, I heard you say, doesn't rank super high in the United States. So everything we're looking at, which is good, like we got to partner locally, you know, harvest opportunities that we can share across county lines, et cetera. But my question is, like, where they got this figured out, and what's the playbook we can bring home here? Because Ohio doesn't have it all figured out yet, trying.
No.
So that's number one, and number two is, what's your call to action for us?
So the call to action probably differs depending on who you are in the room, but there are things that, you know, that everybody could do. Your point on the first item, that Ohio doesn't have everything right, and Ohio probably does some things better than others. We certainly are not looking just in Ohio for other examples. And for instance, the Strive Together organization, although based in Cincinnati and Chicago now, looks at communities other places. And actually, we were invited to a meeting last fall for community is sort of word for city, because our counterparts do include more rural and, you know, even Appalachian parts of Ohio, but communities in other states that are forming regional education partnerships. And it was a meeting that only groups from the state of Washington, the state of Minnesota, and the state of Ohio were invited to. And there were only 3 cities from Ohio invited, and we were one of them. So we're certainly taking a look well outside Ohio.
Thank you, Bob. That was very interesting, quite honestly sobering, too. This comment is not so much about where you went to high school either. So.
Right.
It is more of a comment about an opportunity, I think, that exists. We were fortunate enough about a little over a year ago to receive $1 million gift from a gentleman from Boston. And he said, Toledo deserves this. And what he was referring to is he is addressing literacy issues in our community, and not necessarily just at St. Francis, but in the community. And so he wanted to have a much wider impact. So our invitation to Lead Tomorrow, Toledo Tomorrow, is to collaborate with us.
Sure.
Because we're looking for opportunities for our kids to mobilize our forces to get out there and address this issue. And a lot of it's focused in on kindergarten readiness. So would you guys be willing to partner with us?
Absolutely. So I probably should give a longer answer to Brent's question, but Joe is the same idea here. So what can different people in this room do? You know, I could give a very quick answer, and that's probably not the best answer, that everybody here could go find a school or go find a child care center and read to kids, and that would really be a fantastic thing to do. Everybody here could take a student and mentor them, and that would be a great thing to do too. And quite frankly, we have way more things that should probably really be done on a bigger scale in Toledo than we have time for right now. When the county was the first one who came to us and said, would you do some workforce work and would you work with adults? And at the time, 2 years ago, I said, well, me and my merry band of 4 people, we're pretty busy just working with mostly the high schools here that we're working with. I said, on the other hand, you want to make a couple more people show up in our office, then we're willing to do more work. And that's part of it too. The group that was involved in Strive Together before was called Aspire. Probably a number of you know about Aspire. And I'm not going to say that I would have done the exact same thing they did, and you can make comments maybe on other things about the group, which I won't. But one of the problems was they only had 2.5 people. No matter how good those 2.5 people are, there's only so many things you're going to do. I actually was invited to go out to the Harlem Children's Zone last fall, and I got an intensive 3-day tour of what they're doing out there, and they were doing some pretty interesting stuff. But the biggest thing they were doing was after-school programs. And Jeffrey Canada, who runs that group out there, has become has some pretty good national acclaim. And 2 of the things that he reiterates is this is not going to happen overnight. Changes are not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to be cheap. It's going to take money and it's going to take resources. But so certainly marrying up schools to mentor and teach younger kids is absolutely something that can be done. And for those of you who are interested, please reach out to us, because the truth of the matter is, I think I've been a reasonably busy person for not long after I got out of college. I am busier right now than I've ever been in my life, and in part because I see the need in my face every day now, and there's no shortage of it, and you keep finding other things to do. You see things like accounting firms coming into high schools and other communities and helping the parents and the guardians fill out FAFSA forms. And you see that in a number of other communities. And there are all kinds of ways to marry up different groups here with the students and the families that need help.
I was just going to say that, Chuck Stocking had introduced me to Partners in Education, and one of the things that I realized was that literacy was one of the major legitimate roles out of poverty. And if we don't find a way to get these things started, then kids are going to find illegitimate ways to get out of poverty, and that will include the violence that we're experiencing now. So I wish and hope that some of the ARPA money that's out there will go towards making sure that we get this kindergarten to career, travel going, because it will reduce the violence, in my opinion. And the other thing I was going to say was that is there a way for the construction trades to maybe have the same type of job fairs that colleges have? Because when I looked at the number of kids that actually do not complete college, a lot of it has to do with kids just not being college oriented, or college may not necessarily be for them, and to find another avenue that would increase people finding legitimate careers or good careers and being able to make a great living would be another way for us to increase those statistics that say that we're having success within our city. So I don't know if that's possible, but if it is, I would certainly love to do whatever I could to help facilitate that.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. I think that is right and important. So there was a study several years ago, and the challenging thing about preparing for today was figuring out what I could only say in 25 minutes as opposed to standing up here for 2+ hours and talking. Toledo was rated the #1 city in the country, #1 in the whole country, for being able to have a good job without a degree past high school. And our trades, construction trades and manufacturing, are a huge part of that. There's the TPS Career Expo is one example. There are a number of other good career tech programs in high schools in the Toledo area. TPS has the best one, and they do. But they have the biggest one in numbers too. So there are lots of ways. And although I think we had mostly companies up here, actually Tony, I think of Bitwise being a nonprofit. I don't think it is actually. But there were a lot of the trades were at the Career Expo too. And to the notion on literacy, that's absolutely right. There's an organization that rates the literacy of every state, of the adults in the state, and gives it a 5-star rating. 1 is the worst and 5 is the best. In Ohio, 20% of the adults get a 1-star. Only half of the adults in Ohio get 3 stars or better. So we have a ways to go on literacy, and back to it needs to start at the beginning. Because if it doesn't start at the beginning, kids are either going to do good things or bad things. Adults are either going to do good things or bad things. And if you don't have a good foundation, you might get steered the wrong direction.
Hey, Bob, one quick question, Bob.
Last question, Gary, I'm told.
The percentage of children in Lucas County that have high lead levels, it's one of the highest in the country, and that has an extremely strong impact on learning. And when we looked at kindergarten readiness, you can't educate lead out of a person. It has to be eliminated. And if you talk about Toledo tomorrow, what thoughts do you have on the idea of let's reduce lead tomorrow?
Sure. We are fully supportive of that. Quite frankly, no one, other than I hear that conversation, Rotary and other places, obviously, no one has asked us to do anything on lead. We're not going to jump into the lead business right now, but if you're looking for a letter of support or other things like that, we can write one. We could probably get other people to write them. You need somebody to go speak in front of city council or the county commissioners are probably willing to do that too. Because there are a number of factors, and actually we've done a little bit at the state level, and I think maybe even I as a person get some credit in some of the committees we've been on banding together the urban communities and going to Columbus and saying, hey, we have some problems that are worse than the other parts of Ohio, and we need to work together to help solve them. Cindy, thank you.
One second, Bob. Bob, on behalf of our club, we'd like to thank you for your time today and sharing all of this great information with a Toledo Rotary mug. And we also will be making a donation to the Polio Plus Fund in your name.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right, next week, I hope you all join us again and maybe bring a friend. On January 30th, we will have a speaker from the American Heart Association that will speak to us on Go Red for Women. And as we settle into this new home, you can all see what a great place it is. Again, we really would like to have more and more people attend, and see if you can encourage your fellow Rotarians to join you as well. Today we have 6 committee meetings, which I think is the largest number I recall having. You can see on the screen where they're being held, but I'll just kind of go through them. All of the summit rooms are down where you walked past them on your way in. So youth services will be in Summit A, Constitution Committee in Summit B, Environmental in Summit C, Community Service in Summit D. Disability Services will meet in one area of this room here, and so will Vocational Services. I thank you all for coming today, and go out and have a great week. Thanks.